don't know, 8 years or so. Friends with Dave and Steph for a while. I go to the ECF church just over the road. Dave just asked me to share a bit about my sort of background. Has anyone ever been to Europe? Anyone been to England? So I grew up in England. Yous are the luckiest people growing up over here. It's very different over there. And my life sort of has happened so far in 3 stages. It was quite light and nice to start with. I went through a real dark patch in the middle, and now it's pretty light again. Now, growing up over in England, I was brought up in a sort of Christian family. You know, we went to church and whatnot, and it was all really good, really loving, great parents. We were brought up in a sort of biblical-based family. My granddad, my opa, he's a bit of a theologian, so I was brought up with these, you know, biblical truths, and they were good. But they really didn't affect my life much, you know. And as I was sort of getting up to the age of about 19, family life took a real sudden change, and my parents split up. There was a whole bunch of unfaithfulness going on. Dad veered away, you know, we'd actually stopped going to church, and my mum has gone away to work, and a whole bunch of bad stuff happened, and that had a massive effect on me. Now, I've always said that we're not defined by what we do necessarily, but it does have a massive reflection on who we are, and that's really been true in my life. So when I was a kid, I was 8 years old, and I started doing judo, and I realised I was pretty good at it. I ended up fighting for England. I ended up being the European champion, and I found out fighting was my thing. You know, it was the one thing I was good at. But if you don't know, judo it's a pretty gentle kind of a martial art. But as I got to about 19, my parents split. My whole definition of love had changed. My whole world essentially had been ripped in two and torn apart. And from then on, like I say, what you do has a real strong reflection on who you are. And I changed martial arts. I started getting into some of the sort of kung fu type stuff. I ended up getting I got a black belt in karate. I got another black belt in Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do. And then it got darker still, and I started getting involved in MMA, which is mixed martial arts. And that's probably a very different thing back then to what it is now. Nowadays it's all televised and all the rest of it. Back then, essentially in England, it was run by the Spanish mafia, and you'd fight for quite a bit of money, and it's pretty dark and pretty nasty. It wasn't a very healthy scene to be involved in, especially as a 19, 20-year-old. But that's the scene I ended up getting myself involved in. And then, and I found out, again, I was good at this. You know, I was good at fighting. This is what I did. And so that really started to define me as a person, and it got me prestige. Suddenly I'm getting into all these nightclubs, you know, and I'm getting VIP treatment. Girls are starting to get interested in me, you know, and all of this stuff. And it was a pretty sad state of affairs, really, that I'd let that define me. Now, that went on well into my sort of mid-20s, until finally my brother pulled me aside one day and he said, "Sam, you were brought up in a Christian home, mate. The way you're living doesn't really reflect it very much." By this stage, I was in a mess. I was chasing after different girls. I was drinking at least 3 times a week, you know, way too heavily. And then it got to a point where my partying wasn't enough. You know, I wanted to keep going, and I started getting involved, just dabbling here and there in drugs and this sort of thing. And it got really dark. And the heartbreak and the heartache that it caused me, I can't even explain it to you. It was real bad, you know, real bad. Just constantly trying to escape from what had gone on in my family. Till finally one day I followed my brother over to Australia, and the Lord calls into my life and he says, "Sam, you need to have more faith in me." And it was literally this reverberating saying that kept going over and over in my head: "Have more faith in me, have more faith in me." But as far as I was concerned, I'd made a massive mess. Some girl had actually followed me over to Australia, and I was trying to cruise around. We bought a car together. There's just too many barriers in the way. But finally I said to him, "Lord, okay, God, I will. I'll have more faith in you, but look at the mess I'm in. I need some help here." And as soon as I did that, everything just went bang, 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 bang. All these obstacles I put up fell over, and the Lord just poured out this blessing on my life. And I came up here and I found this church. I got welcomed in by Josh and Donna, I'm sure you know them. I started getting into my Bible, and I started, all of this stuff I knew as a kid suddenly didn't just make sense, but it came alive to me. In my first year of really giving my life back to the Lord, I read that Bible, I think it was 6 times in different translations, just to really get it in my head. I was reading, you know, I think it's 15, 20 chapters a day, just really just getting into it, and it was amazing. All of this stuff made sense. And it told me that actually all of the stuff I'd done, all of the stuff I'd done wrong, actually didn't matter. That's not who defined me. Actually what defines me is what Jesus had done for me. And this truth just hit me like a slab weight on the back of the head. I'd been hit a few times in my past. This thing hit me way harder than any of them. And it was amazing. It was life-changing. Suddenly I realised that I could be accepted by God who made me, not because of anything I've done, but because of what had been done for me. And like I say, the blessings of the Lord just poured out on me. I ended up getting married. I'm now happily married, back in that family life where I started. Remember I said it went light, dark, light. I'm now in the light again, which is good. I've got my own family. I've got 5 kids. We're looking to get involved in foster care as well, which is amazing. Working in with the church and a few other things like that. And life has got value and meaning like it never had in that dark section in the middle. So I just encourage all of you just to explore it. If you've grown up in this life, make sure you're applying it correctly. Make sure it's actually changing you and developing you as a person. If you've never heard about any of this stuff, look into it. You know, it makes sense. I'm not an idiot, and as much as I was grown up with it, I wouldn't do this if it made no sense. If tomorrow Buddhism got proven correct, I'd turn Buddhist. But it hasn't. The more I've looked into this, the more I've read it, the more it makes sense and comes alive to me. So it's basically all I got for you. But if anyone's got any questions for me, please feel free to grab me and ask me. And yeah, thanks for giving us your time, mate.